Some people say that life writes the most unbelievable scripts. This story falls into that category. It involves love, obsession, madness, and unfortunately no happy ending. If we were indeed talking about a feature film, we might just say the director got a bit carried away. However, the terrifying part is that this story really happened. I invite you to listen to the full story. On June 11, 1971, in the city of Newcastle in New South Wales, Australia, Giuseppe Cinque was born. He was named after his grandfather, although everyone called him Joe. His parents, Maria and Nino, were originally from Italy. After moving to Australia, they quickly settled into their new environment. They worked hard to create suitable conditions for starting a family. 4 years after Joe was born, Maria gave birth to another son, Anthony. The Cinque family was always close-knit. Family values were paramount to them. Every evening they would eat dinner together and talk about the events of the day. Maria loved to cook. Close ones recall that, as an Italian, she expressed her feelings through preparing traditional dishes. Joe had a very happy childhood. He was an energetic and adventurous boy. He played tennis, cricket, and soccer. He was not only an enthusiastic athlete but also a good student. Initially, Joe wanted to become an architect. However, after finishing high school, he decided that he didn't want to spend his days behind a desk, so he chose to study civil engineering instead. Joe was a typical extrovert. People naturally gravitated towards him. He had a sense of humor and charisma, and he easily made new friends. He had a wide circle of friends and was very well liked. A smile practically never left his face. He was the kind of person who always tried to resolve conflicts, make people laugh when they were sad, and never spoke ill of others. He always juggled multiple activities at once and disliked being bored. After graduating, he first embarked on a 2-month trip around Europe and then began working in his hometown in a small company as a project manager. In 1995, during an evening out at a bar with friends, Joe met an attractive law and economics student named Singh. She was studying at a university in the capital, Canberra, and was visiting her family and friends in Newcastle at the time. It could be said that Joe fell in love at first sight. Anu was born in Punjab, India. When she was 2 years old, her parents decided to move to Sydney. Both were doctors, and Anu came from a wealthy family. Anu was intelligent, eloquent, and very confident, and her beauty caught many eyes. Although Joe and Anu were separated by over 250 miles, they decided they wanted to be together. Initially, Anu kept their relationship a secret. Her parents wanted her to focus on her studies, not on romance. Despite the distance between them, their relationship kept growing stronger. Joe and Anu planned a future together. It was clear that this was something serious. Every Friday, Joe would get in his car and drive 5 hours to spend time with his girlfriend. On Monday, he would return to Newcastle to make it to work by 9 a.m. He called Anu several times a day. Sometimes, when she was having a tough time, Joe would fly to Anu in the middle of the week to be by her side and support her. Eventually, Joe decided to move to Canberra and live with his girlfriend in a house on the outskirts of the city. He left behind his family, friends, and a good job to start a new chapter in his life. Joe's parents did not approve of this decision. They had met Anu, and although everything seemed fine at first glance, Joe's mother, Maria, recalls that Anu was strange. During family gatherings, she would talk about her former partners and how intense those relationships were, comparing Joe and their relationship to her past ones. Anu loved being the center of attention and shocking others. When Joe was talking to someone, she would make sure his attention didn't stay on anyone else for too long by interrupting or starting to cuddle with Joe. Over time, Joe's close ones began to notice that he had changed significantly. He was subdued and withdrawn. He was no longer the same lively, talkative, energetic man they knew. Anu had a dominant personality, and Joe completely submitted to her because he cared deeply for her. She had him wrapped around her finger. Joe's mother, Maria, recalls that when he still lived at home, Anu would call every evening about 10 minutes into their dinner, fully aware that she was interrupting the meal. Maria had asked her a few times to call a bit later so Joe could eat in peace, but Anu ignored her requests. Furthermore, among her own friends, Anu was considered the drama queen, always needing to be the center of attention, even forcibly. In the long run, she was exhausting and annoying. Initially, Joe attributed all the problems in their relationship to the distance between them, but after moving in together, he realized that Anu was the main source of these issues. The relationship, once full of closeness and understanding, became a torment of mutual grievances and arguments. Anu needed constant reassurance that she was beautiful, that Joe loved her, and she demanded his continuous attention. Everything had to revolve around her. Joe quickly grew tired of this and eventually concluded that their relationship was toxic and considered breaking up. At that point, he revived a bit. He bought a car as a gift to himself, and his close ones recall that the spark in Joe's eyes returned.
2 months after he came back, he met the demon. I call the demon. And that was the end of him. That's the only mistake he made in his life. That's the only mistake he made in life. And he paid.
Anu probably also noticed this change and that Joe was slowly slipping away. She had been struggling with mental health issues for a long time. She had a hard time coping with moving from her hometown to study. She missed her family greatly and began experimenting with drugs. When she met Joe, she was in a relationship with another man, Simon Walsh. However, Simon quickly discovered that she was cheating on him and ended their relationship. That's when Anu's problems escalated. She became obsessed with dieting and exercising, telling her friends that she would rather die than be fat. Eventually, she developed bulimia, compulsive overeating, and depression. Her parents encouraged her to see a psychologist or psychiatrist, but she refused. At that time, Joe tried to help her as much as he could. They were still in a long-distance relationship. Whenever she felt worse, he was there for her. Even though initially after moving to Canberra it seemed that Anu's condition had stabilized, unfortunately it didn't last long. Anu stopped attending her university classes and completely neglected her appearance. She then became convinced that she was terminally ill. Initially she thought she had AIDS, but the test results didn't confirm her fears. Then she believed that her metabolism wasn't working properly and that her muscles were wasting away. Anu was convinced she was dying. Her legs hurt, she had hot flashes, and she was constantly tired. She didn't believe the doctors when they tried to assure her that she was physically fine. Finally, she began blaming Joe for her poor health. When she thought she had AIDS, she told a friend that it was unfair that she was dying while Joe was healthy. She even planned to put her infected blood on his toothbrush. However, as I mentioned earlier, it turned out that Anu wasn't ill. She also claimed that Joe once suggested she could use a drug when she was very worried about her weight. She said he suggested medicine used in some cases of poisoning to induce vomiting. Joe's family doesn't believe he would have suggested such a method to his girlfriend, especially knowing she had eating disorders. At one point, Anu decided that her life no longer had any meaning and that she wanted to end it, especially since she believed she was dying anyway. She tried to buy a gun, but none of the people she asked for help took her seriously. Everyone thought it was just typical Anu trying to create controversy again. She began selling her clothes and giving away unnecessary items, arguing that she wouldn't need them anymore. Anu's parents tried to have her admitted to a psychiatric hospital for treatment, but she refused hospitalization. They even tried to get her treated without her consent, but this required court approval, and the process was extremely slow. Anu decided to end both her life and Joe's in a suicide pact. Theoretically, such a pact requires the will and consent of both parties, but Anu didn't care about that. For several months, Joe lived under the same roof with a woman who was planning to kill them both. Anu spent long hours in the library with her friend Madhavi Rao, who was privy to her plans. They tried to gather as much information as possible about how to end their lives. Eventually, Anu decided to use heroin. She managed to get in touch with people from the drug world and learned from them how to properly inject the substance. She practiced on herself and on Madhavi. Both tested how their bodies reacted to heroin. Finally, Anu decided she was ready. She planned a farewell party for herself and Joe. Madhavi invited friends, and on October 20th, 1997, people gathered at Anu's house. The attendees knew the purpose of the gathering and were aware that Anu planned to kill herself and her partner that night. Nonetheless, no one thought it would actually happen. They came out of curiosity and believed Anu was just trying to draw attention to herself as usual. However, none of these people did anything to prevent the party or Anu's subsequent plans. No one warned Joe. It's worth noting that all the guests were law students who dismissed the unusual rumors and participated in the gathering. The evening passed pleasantly. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and the guests quickly concluded that, As they suspected, nothing would happen that night. What is perhaps most terrifying is that the only person who had no idea of the party's true purpose was Joe. After all the guests had said their goodbyes and left, Anu prepared a coffee for her partner, but she added several Rohypnol tablets, a sedative and tranquilizer. Once Joe was completely defenseless, Anu prepared a syringe with a large dose of heroin. However, it wasn't that simple. She had enormous difficulty finding a vein, and the heroin in the syringe was so concentrated that it clotted, preventing Anu from injecting it. The next day, Joe woke up with just a slight hangover. He didn't realize that he felt this way not because he had drunk too much the night before, but because he had been drugged and narrowly escaped death. Unfortunately, the failed attempt did not deter Anu from her plans. On the contrary, she began planning another gathering, this time to carry out her intentions.
Never imagine something whatsoever, never. When they come in here, all in love, kiss here, kiss over there, that's all what it was. That's all what it was. It was beautiful to see them together.
Just 4 days later, on a Friday, the next meeting took place. This time, too, they were aware that it would be another attempt by Anu to take both her and Joe's lives, and again, no one intervened. After the party ended, Anu prepared coffee again for Joe, this time with 4 crushed sleeping pills. Then, without any issues, she injected him with heroin. She was confident that this dose, combined with the sedatives, would be lethal. Nevertheless, the next day, Joe was still alive. Although he couldn't get out of bed, he restlessly tossed and turned. After 8 hours, Anu decided to administer another dose of heroin for reassurance. On Sunday, Joe's body was still fighting, although he was getting weaker. Anu watched as Joe struggled and slowly died over 2 days. Only when she saw that Joe was almost giving up did she reach for the phone. However, she didn't call an ambulance. She contacted her friend, not Madhavi this time. She told her that she didn't know what to do because Joe was vomiting dark liquid and likely overdosed. Her friend advised her to call emergency services immediately. Anu initially refused, fearing Joe's anger. When her friend used strong language and suggested Anu could face charges of manslaughter, Anu finally dialed emergency number. During the call, she remained unusually calm, requesting an ambulance due to her partner's heroin overdose. At the same time, she continued to play some sort of game, doing everything to delay Joe from receiving help too quickly. She claimed her name was Olivia, not Anu, and gave the wrong address. At times she yelled into the phone, only to speak calmly moments later. When the paramedics finally arrived, Joe was unconscious on the floor. They tried to resuscitate him, but the brownish liquid coming from his mouth made artificial respiration difficult. Anu paced around, approached the paramedics several times, and asked if the man would make it. Unfortunately, later that afternoon, Joe passed away. His parents had already started to worry when he didn't call them in the morning, as he usually did every Sunday. Around 5 p.m., Maria, Joe's mother, decided to contact her son herself. However, a police officer answered the phone. Almost simultaneously, the police knocked on their door. Upon hearing that their son was involved, Maria's first thought was that Anu had killed Joe. The autopsy revealed that Joe died from asphyxiation due to vomiting under the influence of heroin and sedatives. Investigators wondered how this young, healthy man, with no history of drug use, died in such a manner. Suicide was quickly ruled out, and Anu was transported to the police station for questioning. At that time, she was wearing a long white nightgown, sweating and nervous. She told detectives about the pact she had planned to carry out. The officers were curious why. Then, her plan resulted in only Joe's death, sparing herself in the end. Anu couldn't answer that question. The police officer who interviewed her recalled that he did not detect sadness in her voice, and despite her tears, she also did not remember needing a tissue to wipe her eyes. As a result, Anu was charged with murder. During the investigation, it emerged that her friend had actively participated in the preparations for Joe's murder. Sedatives and heroin were found in her apartment, along with brochures on addiction and vein locations. She was also the organizer of both events and had invited guests who attended these meetings. Madhavi was also charged with murder. Investigators believed she was infatuated with Anu and easily manipulated. In October 1998, a joint trial of both women began. After several weeks, however, such a solution was abandoned due to technical and procedural issues. At that time, both Anu and Madhavi decided to have a trial only before a judge, excluding the involvement of a jury in deciding the case. Anu did not testify. Her defense lawyer emphasized that she suffers from serious mental disorders and her sanity at the time of the act was impaired. An expert who testified during the trial stated that Anu suffers from depression and borderline personality disorder, as well as eating disorders. Borderline personality disorder, or BPD, is a disorder characterized by mood instability, identity disturbances, feelings of emptiness, and impulsivity. This disorder is marked by predominance of negative emotions, fear of rejection, difficulty in building stable relationships with others, and an inconsistent self-image. It was emphasized that her illness affected Anu's assessment of the situation. The prosecutor, on the other hand, tried to show that Anu acted with cold-bloodedness and her actions were meticulously planned. According to him, it was difficult to argue that Anu did not know what she was doing when she had done thorough research on the subject, organized a second event after her initial efforts failed, and at the very end, during the call to the emergency services, gave the wrong address. Moreover, the question of why Anu did not continue with her plan after killing Joe and did not take her own life remained unanswered. As a potential motive, it was suggested that Anu realized Joe wanted to leave her and did not want to allow it. However, looking at it from another angle, it could also be that in Anu's opinion, Joe was the source of her health problems and she wanted to take revenge on him. In mid-97, Anu told her friend that she would gladly kill her ex-boyfriend Simon, Joe, and doctors who did not help her. She also added that she had enough knowledge of law and psychology to easily convince others that she was insane. In court, Anu often hid her face in her hands and cried, while at the same time peeking through her fingers to see if anyone was watching her breakdown. Witnesses from both parties also testified in the case. They were asked why none of them reacted and stopped Anu, but no one could give a satisfactory answer.
Quite a few fights with her. She was just very possessive, just wanted him. And I said to him, you end up that you're going to leave Newcastle, you're going to leave your family, she's going to want you down there. And that's exactly what happened. I never liked her. Honest to God, I never liked her. I'm not saying this now. She never got a present from me. They knew each other for nearly 3 years. Never got a present from me because there was something about her that I didn't trust her. She tried too hard, and I knew there was something wrong there. Weekend. Sunday, I ran up past 5, 6. I thought I better give them a ring. I'm sure they came back. And when I rang, it was a policeman who ran me the phone.
Meantime, the bell was...
Yeah, and same time the bell rang, there was another policeman from the street come and tell us what happened.
So the policeman go around the house and come in the back. When I see him, I say, well, what's going on? I say, Mr. Cinque, have a seat.
My son didn't die peaceful. That's what they say. You ever need to, you die. You didn't die like that. It took 3 days and they destroy all this inside. You are mad. You make that child. And you know what make you feel? Your child being killed like that. And it's not the easy way to die.
The behavior of the guests is described as the bystander effect, where responsibility is diffused among many witnesses, reducing the likelihood that anyone will act. The feeling of moral responsibility for action is then spread among several people, and an individual bystander does not feel responsible enough to do something. Ultimately, the judge decided that Anu's sanity at the time of the act was impaired due to her mental state. On April 23, 1999, Anu was found guilty of causing death with diminished responsibility and sentenced to 10 years in prison, with the possibility of applying for early release after 4 years. Taking into account the time Anu spent in custody awaiting trial, she ultimately served only 18 months. Joe's parents were shocked by this verdict. They recalled that initially they thought it was some kind of bad joke. They emphasized their disappointment in the Australian justice system and stated that they cannot come to terms with what happened. Upon hearing the verdict, Maria shouted at Anu, "Rot in hell, B." To this day, she calls Anu the devil and openly admits that she hates her. Joe's father passed away in 2017, and since then, Maria has not spoken publicly about her son's death. During her time in prison, Anu completed her legal studies and even earned a doctorate. Eventually, she received psychological help and appropriate medication. In 2001, At the age of 29, she was released on parole. However, 3 years later, she was caught smoking weed and had to spend an additional 3 months in prison. Anu currently resides in Sydney and is in a committed relationship with a man she met during her time in prison. She claims that she cannot understand her actions now, but takes full responsibility for them. Public apologies to Joe's family were not accepted. Regarding Madhavi, the court found no evidence that she participated in administering the drug, and she was ultimately acquitted. Her direct involvement in the preparation of Joe's murder was deemed irrelevant by the court. The sane policeman who handled the case was very surprised by such a verdict. I'm curious about your opinion on this matter, especially regarding the verdict and the behavior of the guests at the party.
Are you happy to go home to your family today?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the end. Take care. Goodbye.